So I feel like I first got to give a shout out to MailKimp for being a sponsor. I appreciate that. Thank you, MailKimp and everyone else. Anyway, all right, let's get things started here. So I want to begin with a question. I want to ask you, who would you rather curate a show around? And I'm sure you all have created many personas in your day and love these personas. So I'm going to give you two very different personas to think about. All right? Sound good? Yes. Okay, so persona A is a nomad. Spends his life moving around Europe for the most part, rents a room in a house with other unproven artists, particularly enjoys painting pictures of his very own bedroom. Friends describe him as a little eclectic, maybe sort of weird, and he eventually dies before achieving any sort of fame. Person B is your typical high school student. He lives just outside of Baltimore. Visits a mosque regularly with his very devout Muslim parents, spends some time smoking and hanging out with his friends, like some high schoolers do. And he has a Korean girlfriend, but he recently broke up with her. Again, to jump to the chase before I tell you who these people are, the real thing I want to get across is that great stories happen to those who can tell them, and both of these people have really fantastic stories, although they've been brought up in very different ways. By now, you probably know at least one, if not both of them. I'm guessing a lot of you know both. This is our good friend Vinny Van Gogh right here. He's fairly mainstream these days. You might have seen his work on socks and coffee mugs. Benedict Cumberbatch played a pretty mean Vince Van Gogh recently. But, he's been pretty successful in shows around the world. Alternatively, you may not have heard of this fella, Adnan Syed. So Adnan was in the news around the Baltimore area in '99 because he got convicted of killing his ex-girlfriend, who I mentioned, but kind of fell off from the spotlight for several years until last year. So what happened last year? This happened. Serial. Who's listened to Serial? All right, great. So Sarah Koenig, who we did not hear impression of, decided to scrap up this story and say, what's interesting about this? And, because it had become from This American Life, there was a lot of viewers, and I thought, okay, maybe people are interested. So I was sitting here last year at MCN thinking, there's this great podcast. I bet people would love to see a night talk about this. I promise that actually happened. And truth be told, 80 million people since then have listened to this podcast. So, it's been fairly successful, I would say. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is 10 things you can all take back to your respective organizations or museums and apply these lessons from Serial. Again, it's easy to say, well, they had This American Life ahead of them, but I think there's some more that goes into this. Okay, ready? I'm going to go super quick here. Point number 1, start with a question, as I did tonight. Why is this important? Because it throws it back into someone else's camp, makes it more relatable, makes it more personal, and says, look, I'm thinking about you too, not just myself. In this case, the question was, what did you do yesterday? Do you even remember? Which is a pretty pivotal point. Second thing, intentionally left blank, is that it focuses your senses. Right now, instead of thinking about what's on the screen, you're listening to what I'm saying, and podcasts do this really, really well. For instance, you might get distracted on TV by what someone's wearing, specific dialect, things that maybe don't matter as much. So that's an important thing. Number 3, it balances timeless issues with very timely issues. So deep down, Romeo and Juliet story, everyone's heard this before, but it's timely because it hits on a lot of issues that are current. So whether it's, people going to jail, whether it's race, these things are very current and timely. Number 4, don't be afraid to have perspectives. Very quirky, like our good friend Sarah right here to the left. This is a graph that someone else created about a confused Sarah visualized. And this is okay. Not everything has to be polished in your shows. You can let it be a little gritty. Speaking of grittiness, the show does a good job at capturing people's weird quirks. Some include streaking and weird other things. But the whole time you're kind of asking yourself, I kind of feel like I know someone who does this stuff. Should I be really worried at this point of the game? And that's okay too. Another thing, I'm going very quickly, but in general, it's all about pacing. You can't keep hitting people with heavy stuff over and over and over again. You got to give them time to come down. So as Ira says, I thought I came up with a great way of telling storytelling, but turns out I learned it from my rabbi. He introduces something, pulls it back, then brings it again. Another podcast advantage, think about actually people being comfortable. Maybe they don't want to stand up forever and walk and see things. Give them a chance to learn on their own, sit down, and contemplate again. So I chose to listen to this in the car with my wife so we could have discussions back and forth, and absolutely loved it. Number 8, provide opportunities for people to engage at different levels. So some folks might only want to listen for 40, 45 minutes a week. That's fine. They get the whole gist of thing. But if they want, they can go online and they can look at maps, timelines, and even huge Reddit threads that other people have created. Speaking of which, The great thing about the show is that it was infinitely riffable. This is from SNL. If you haven't checked it out, you should do it. Miley Cyrus has a really great mashup with Wrecking Ball. There's been podcasts about the podcast, and even some of the graphics you see today were all created by other people, which is free marketing. Hooray. And lastly, sorry if you're a Disney fan, but not everything has to end perfect. It's okay. End on a question, not an answer. Here's why I think this. If you see a good movie, what do? You want to read more, you want to watch more, you want to learn more. Museums can be the same way. You don't have to tell the whole story, just get people excited.
Okay.
So, if you didn't get my MailChimp joke, there you have it. You should watch the show, or listen to the show. If you already listened to it, take a step back and think how you can apply some of these messages to your very own museums. This is Miley. Have a good night.